The next morning, I was a little bit tired and a lot hungry. Miss Hatchetface had insisted on bringing me breakfast in bed again when I stumbled downstairs to find that my living room had been demolished. Miss Robbins had set up a blackboard against the far wall and was drawing bizarre satanic symbols all over it with chalk, while Sarah sat at rapt attention in a desk that looked as if it had been stolen from her kindergarten. For just a moment, I couldn't help but think how adult Sarah looked, her bright blue eyes greedily scanning over the board as she drank in its knowledge. I felt a little pang of my little girl's growing up blues before I shook it off, telling myself it was far too early for all that. Next to Sarah's desk gaped a large black pit with burn marks around it. Every once in a while, Frank and Teddy would throw a Cheeto fruit into it, and a large purple tentacle would shoot up from the darkness and catch it mid-air before slithering back down into the darkness. The couch had been pushed up against the staircase. The cushions had somehow been transformed to red, patent leather, and two large, round horns sprouted from either side. I sighed, giving the hole in the ground a wide berth as I went to the kitchen and grabbed a beer from the fridge before plopping down on my couch. I heard a, "Hey, watch where you stick that thing," from my couch and leapt back to my feet.
"The couch decided it doesn't like being sat on all the time, Daddy,"
Sarah said, turning and smiling sweetly up at me. "Oh, okay," I replied dreamily. "I suppose next the carpet will decide it doesn't want people to walk all over it." Sarah giggled.
"Don't be ridiculous, Daddy."
I took a big gulp of my beer. "The courage of the couch is to be commended," Frank and Teddy intoned in his monstrous baritone. "It has risen above its station in life and will soon dominate the humans that once saw fit to make it their seat slave."
"What?"
I began, but Miss Hatchetface cut me off. "Have some more Cheeto fruit, Teddy. You get cranky when your blood sugar is low. No demon in hell has the authority to command me but Satan himself," Frank and Teddy boomed.
"Have some Cheeto fruit, silly,"
Sarah said. "Okay." With that, he lifted up the wheelbarrow of the fruit that was next to him and tipped it down his throat. The sparrow on his head squawked in protest, and Miss Robbins eyed the display with snobbish displeasure. She said, "I don't know why Satan thought that thing was an appropriate companion for a little girl. When I was her age, I kept an evil unicorn. Strider." Her voice drifted off dreamily. "Now he was a pet." "Are you sure it wasn't a dinosaur?" Miss Hatchetface asked, voice dripping with fox honey. Apparently, she hadn't taken it kindly when Miss Robbins had called her a strawberry tart the day before. "And just what is that supposed to mean?" Miss Robbins asked, swelling up indignantly like a great big bullfrog ready to burst. "I believe the Lady Hatchetface is implying that you are old," Frank and Teddy said, wiping the Cheeto dust on the couch, who let out a disgusted grumble. "Yet the Lady Hatchetface is approaching 17,000 years of age herself. Perhaps she is merely implying that you look extremely old." "Yes, well, we aren't all half succubus, and because of the wrinkles. Yes, I understand my appearance and the hunchback," Frank and Teddy finished. Miss Robbins's finger began to wag dangerously in Frank and Teddy's direction, and I decided that I had better cut in before there was any more trouble. "So," I said a little too loudly, "what exactly are you guys learning today?" "We are learning about the fundamentals of demonic possession," came Miss Robins's sharp retort. "And afterwards, perhaps a lesson in etiquette for you, Darren. It is not polite to interrupt a teacher's lesson." "Right. And what about the giant squid hole in my living room?"
"We opened a portal to the netherworld, Daddy,"
Sarah said with the casual ease of someone explaining what they'd had for breakfast that morning.
"It's like Hell's basement, where all the incomprehensible beings that existed in the black void of nothingness before the universe was birthed live."
"Huh," I replied, taking another gulp of beer. Just then, a low, rumbling growl emitted from the hole, shaking the picture frames off the walls and sending cracks through the ceiling. "Could we maybe shut that?"
"We haven't learned how to shut portals yet,"
Sarah replied. "Okay." I took another sip of beer, realized that it was just air because the beer was already gone, and wandered off into the kitchen to see if I could scrounge up something resembling human food. I opened the refrigerator, and my hair blew back as a deep, infernal roar erupted from within. I slammed the door shut. "Sarah!" I called out to the living room.
"Yes, Daddy?"
"Did you open a portal to the netherworld inside the refrigerator?"
"Yes, Daddy."
I sighed, closed my eyes tightly, and rubbed my temples. As I stared into the blackness of the back of my own eyelids, an idea occurred to me. The night before, I had puzzled over the problem of Miss Hatchetface's mysterious conversation with no one until the early hours of the morning. I could not come to any sort of conclusion, my head fogged by lack of sleep and the gentle warmth that perpetually radiated from Miss Hatchetface's skin. Yet now I realized that whatever was going on, Satan was surely behind it. After all, he was the one who had sent Miss Robbins up, and he was the one in charge. And, perhaps most importantly, he was the one who had buzzed me down to hell every time I called his customer service department with a complaint. At first, that had irritated me. It was almost as bad as dealing with Comcast customer service here on Earth, but now it could be an opportunity for me to get down to hell and snoop around a bit. I slid my phone out of my pocket and hit the number for Hell's customer service hotline, which I had saved in my phone. It was picked up after one ring, and the familiar, pushy voice of the customer service representative answered.
"Welcome to Hell's customer service. How may I help you today?"
"You know, that joke's getting pretty tired."
"You don't say. Why don't you come up with something better then?"
"Seems like a lot of effort." The voice on the other end sighed and mumbled something about lazy writing.
"Is this Mr. Rogers again?"
she asked, her tone telling me that she already knew the answer. "Yes, I wanted to talk about a portal to the netherworld in my—"
"Please hold."
The line clicked, and I noted with some confusion that the hold music was Creed's "Can You Take Me Higher?" The line clicked again, and Satan's enthusiastic voice answered.
"David, buddy,"
he almost yelled into the earpiece.
"What's shakin'?"
"It's Darren," I said. "What's shaking is the gaping pit to the netherworld that Sarah opened up in the middle of my living room."
"Oh, well, that's no good. Is Gary down there?"
"Who is Gary?"
"Gary, the giant octopus, whose ink is the source of the universe's dark matter."
"Well, there is a giant octopus."
"All right. Well, I'll send someone to close that portal up right away. How does Tuesday work for you?"
"Satan, it's Wednesday right now."
"I meant the Tuesday after next."
"Satan, there's a giant octopus living beneath my living room, who could squirt dark matter all over my furniture at any moment. Could we maybe talk about this face to face?"
Satan's voice trailed off. "I'm a little busy right now, Darren. Don't worry, I'll send somebody within a few months."
"What happened to Tuesday? No! You know what? Buzz me down."
"Okay,"
Satan said.
"but I'm not at the office."
"Where are—" But my voice was drowned out by the roar of the black and purple fire that swallowed me whole, sucking me down to hell like human-flavored soda through a straw. I stumbled across the rusted red dirt and cracked volcanic stone as I landed in hell, although just where in hell I had no idea. It seemed to be some sort of construction site, where giant, purple-skinned behemoths hauled around girders made from the ancient, yellowed bones of some even larger beast. I stood on a hill overlooking it all, and from my perspective, it seemed as if the demons were laying down a monumental pentagram, flat across an enormous expanse of blood-red sand. Torches stood at each of the 5 points, made from trees so tall and wide that they could have held up the earth itself. Inside each gap between the star and the circle were archaic-looking symbols. I could not explain why, but just looking at them filled me with a deep sense of dread. I looked up to see Satan standing beside me, eyes squinting tight as he surveyed the work, his 2 polished black horns poking through holes in a plastic yellow construction hat. "Hey, Derek," he said, smiling down at me. "What are you doing on the ground?" I scrambled up to my feet, made a poor job of brushing the dirt off of my trousers, and looked at Satan. "So," I trailed off. Now that the first part of my plan had actually worked, I realized that I hadn't really given any thought to what the next part was. What are you guys building?" "Oh, this," Satan grinned. "It's a park." "It's a park in the shape of a pentagram?" "Well, this is hell, Derek. A pentagram fits the aesthetic." "It's Darren, actually," I replied. "What's Darren?" "Never mind." "Okie dokie, Derek," Satan said. "But as you can see, we're a little bit busy down here in hell, and I can't really afford to send anyone up right now to fix the portal in your living room. Why don't you just ask Miss Robbins to do it?" "Miss Robbins knows how to do it?" I asked, momentarily forgetting I was on a fact-finding mission. "Why didn't you just tell me that over the phone?" "Well, you seem like you were in an awful hurry to get down here," Satan replied. "I thought maybe you missed me." "What?" "Is there anything else you need, Derek?" he asked. "As you can see, I'm a little bit busy here." "All you're doing is watching other people." "You're damn right," Satan replied enthusiastically. "I'm the boss down here, and the boss's job is to watch other people work and silently project the idea that they should be working harder." Anyway, I'll see you soon, Derek." "You will?" But Satan did not respond. Instead, the familiar black and purple flames kicked up around me, and I once again felt that sensation of being sucked up through a straw. I landed back in my kitchen, elbows and knees banging hard against the linoleum floor. I struggled back up to my feet and saw that the portal in the living room had been sealed. Gary the octopus was gone, though the burn marks on my carpet remained.
"Satan called while you were on your way up," Sarah explained. "He told Miss Robbins to seal the hole up because you didn't like Carrie. That wasn't a very nice thing to say, Daddy."
"But I didn't." The rumble vibrated from somewhere deep below the earth.
"I think you hurt Gary's feelings, Daddy," Sarah said. "You should probably apologize."
My fingers once again found my temples and began massaging as I squeezed my eyes shut against the chaos of my living room. I had come no closer to finding out what Satan was up to, and I was beginning to wonder if there were any potential side effects from being repeatedly sent to hell and back. And I still hadn't eaten breakfast. My eyes had been shut for all of 10 seconds when I heard a earth-shatteringly loud bellow in my ears. "You appear to be suffering from a headache. Perhaps I can assist you." Frankenteddy was bent down, his face so close to mine that I could count the particles of Cheeto powder at the corners of his mouth. "No, thank you, Frankenteddy. I'm just fine." Very well. I turned towards Miss Robbins. Listen, Miss Robbins, I began. I don't want to come downstairs to find any more portals to the netherworld in my living room. Nor do I want to come down to find a couch that talks and is suddenly useless to sit on. Miss Robbins swelled indignantly. My teaching methods. Your teaching methods are just fine if you're teaching in your own home. I cut her off. But as long as you are teaching here, not to mention staying in the guest bedroom, you're to follow the rules of my household, which, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this, include a no portals to netherworld clause. Miss Robbins glowered at me like she was a frog, and I was an agile fly who had danced out of the reach of her gaping maw. Luckily, she must have decided that she was too offended for words, because she simply stormed off upstairs, reptilian tail flopping each step as she went up. You know, the couch said, cushions flapping up as if the three of them composed a giant mouth. You're useless to sit on too, but you don't hear me throwing it in your face. I believe that the Lady Robbins was wounded by your words, Frankenteddy boomed, but I do not believe the wound to be fatal. I sighed and wondered if it was safe trying to get another beer from the fridge. Sarah hadn't mentioned anything about the portal in the kitchen being closed, but I knew I had something else to do first. Sarah, I began wearily. I'm sorry I interrupted your lesson.
It's okay, Daddy.
Sarah grinned, her bright blue eyes shining with a child's carelessness.
I was ready for a break anyway. Can I go upstairs and play tea party with Frank and Teddy?
Of course, honey.
Yay!
Sarah squealed, streaming upstairs in a little girl-sized blur before pausing at the banister and shouting at Frank and Teddy.
Come on, silly.
Yes, Princess Sarah. I heard the stairs creak and protest as Frank and Teddy's immense frame rocketed up them. How is your head, Mr. Rogers? I heard Miss Hatchetface's kind voice at my elbow. It's okay, I replied. Are you sure? Maybe I could make you a snack and that would... No, I shouted out reflexively. Miss Hatchetface's eyes had widened in surprise. I just meant... My mind stalled as it searched for an excuse. I'll feel better once I get this mess cleaned up in the living room.
Oh, okay,
Miss Hatchetface said cheerily. I'll help. We made our way over to the miniature mock classroom, Miss Hatchetface to the blackboard and me to the desk. Miss Hatchetface lifted the blackboard over her head and began carrying it towards the garage. But I didn't touch the desk. I was looking at something I saw in Sarah's notebook. The page she had been taking notes on had been ripped out, but there was a familiar figure in the indentations on the next page. I took the pencil she had carelessly left on the desk and began to edge it lightly over the indentations in the paper. When I had finished, I was staring at something I'd definitely seen before. That day, in fact, a large pentagram dominated the page. Little archaic symbols dotted between each gap between the star and the outer circle. They were the exact same symbols I'd seen in the Colossus under construction in Hell. I don't know what Satan is planning, but I do know that whatever it is, Sarah is involved. I stared disbelievingly at the page I'd torn off in my hand. The symbol was the same as the one I saw in Hell. There was no doubt about that. I heard a rustling from behind me, and Miss Hatchetface's voice said, "Do you need some help with that, Mr. Rogers?" I crumpled the paper in my fist and quickly stuffed it in my pocket. "What was that?" Miss Hatchetface asked. "It was a cute drawing Sarah did in class," I lied. "That's lovely." Miss Hatchetface smiled, but the joy didn't quite touch her eyes. Resting there was something more akin to suspicion. "Well, I'll just get that desk for you then," she said, stepping around me and lifting the school desk as if it were nothing. I watched her carry the desk off to the garage before sliding the paper out of my pocket once again. I pulled up my cell phone camera to take a picture, then stuffed the paper back in my pocket, resolving to get rid of the evidence that I'd been snooping later. As I was doing so, something else caught my eye. The remote of minor inconveniences was just laying carelessly discarded on the coffee table. I grabbed the little black rectangle with purple buttons and stuffed it into my pocket as well. I stood there in the middle of the living room, waiting for Miss Hatchetface to return, so that I could try my best to act natural. But she didn't come. Confused, I went back to the garage to investigate. I put my ear up to the door, but all I could hear was a faint murmuring. I edged the remote out of my pocket, scanning it to see if there was something that might help me to hear better. My eyes moved over the many buttons, taking in things like flaming burps, 2 left feet, and hairy tongue, before finally settling on one button, a button I'd seen Sarah use on Frankenteddy once before, Dumbo mode. I took a hard swallow in anticipation of what I knew the remote was going to do to me, pointed it at my head, and pressed the button. Instantly, I felt a disturbing sensation as my ears became numb, but not numb like someone with soft, gloved hands was pulling on them, but instead of hurting, the ears just expanded like silly putty. I felt at my left ear and discovered that it was now roughly 2 times the size of my hand. I pressed it to the door. The indistinct murmurs had now become hushed whispers, quiet but clear enough for me to make out.
"I keep telling you we should have these conversations in hell,"
came Miss Hatchetface's urgent whisper. I strained my giant ears, listening for another voice, but there was none.
"I think he's starting to suspect something. I told you not to send that old woman."
There was another gap in the conversation as Miss Hatchetface listened to whoever it was.
Yes, I told you, she's almost ready. I've never seen anyone learn the magic so fast. You must have been right about her. Just get construction done on your end."
There was another long silence, and then the shuffling of feet coming towards the door. I darted back into the living room as quickly and as silently as I could, padding up the stairs as I fumbled with the remote of minor inconveniences. Then I ran into a fuzzy brick wall. Scratch that. It was Frankenteddy. Time slowed as I began to fall backwards over the stairs, and I wondered if they'd be able to shrink my ears back down after I'd died from a broken neck. But I didn't die. Instead, an enormous furry paw reached out and grabbed me by the front of my shirt, yanking me roughly back to my feet. As he pulled me to a stop, my giant ears wobbled ridiculously. "Pardon me, Lord Rogers." Frankenteddy's voice boomed at least twice as loud in my new giant ears. "It's okay, really. I just need to get by so that I can—" "It seems you have altered your appearance," Frankenteddy droned on, oblivious to my wincing at the monstrous cacophony of his voice. "A wise decision. Your nose looks much smaller compared to your new ears." Wait, what's wrong with my nose?" "There is nothing wrong with it. It is glorious and noble, like my father's nose." "Oh, well he was a toucan Sam doll." "Right. Thanks, Frankenteddy." I heard a delicate throat clear, and I turned to see Miss Hatchetface standing at the foot of my stairs.
"Oh my,"
she said, her voice choked and strained as if she was trying to hold back laughter.
"What happened to your ears, Mr. Rogers?"
"I just got to fooling around with the remote," I said sheepishly. "Do you know how to reverse it?"
"Just hit the previous channel button."
She laughed. I pointed the remote at my head and did as she said. My ears shrunk down. But then I heard the sound of ripping fabric, and there was a new, peculiar sensation I'd never felt before. It felt like... "Miss Hatchetface," I said.
"Yes, Mr. Rogers?"
"Do I have a pig's tail?"
"Yes, Mr. Rogers."
"How do I get rid of the tail?"
"Hit the mute button."
"Thank you." I pointed the remote at myself and hit the mute button, and I felt a slight breeze through the hole in my pants where the tail had been. "Your appearance has been restored to normal," Frankenteddy boomed. "Your nose is once again the glorious apex of your face." "Thank you, Frankenteddy. I need to go upstairs to the study and get some work done." "Of course, Lord Rogers." Frankenteddy stepped to the side, and with some difficulty I managed to squeeze past him. I went into the study and pulled up my laptop, opened up the web browser and began scouring the internet for information about the pentagram I'd found. I pored over dozens of websites, ranging from the encyclopedic to the downright disturbing. Finally, I found what I was looking for. The website was down a link rabbit hole. The URL just a string of random numbers. It was the kind of website that search engines don't index, that you can only get to by following link after link haphazardly until you stumble upon it accidentally. But I had found it. It looked as if it hadn't been touched in years, like those old blog websites from the mid-90s. There was only one page, and no other explanation except for the blood-red letters that peeled out of the solid black background, and a carbon copy of the pentagram I had now saved in my phone. I leaned in closely, and I could see the light from the computer screen bottom lighting my face in the black reflection of the screen as I scanned the article. The Ritual of Amud Magar. The Ritual of Amud Magar is perhaps the most ancient and powerful of all satanic rites. To understand this ritual, you must first understand that the realms of earth and hell are separated by a dimensional barrier. The barrier is impenetrable, but it is not perfect. At certain places on earth, places where great evil has occurred, there exist tiny cracks just large enough for the souls of those who perpetrated the evil to pass through. An act of extreme evil may even allow for some demons to send a piece of their souls through the cracks and haunt those who visit such places. The Ritual of Amud Magar works to widen these cracks so the larger demonic souls may escape back to the earth's surface. And then, as I read the last paragraph, my mouth went dry. My tongue felt as if it had swelled up, cutting off my air supply. I heard a sudden ringing in my ears. This rite is only theoretical and has never been used, as it requires the Dark Lord Satan himself to perform it in hell. It is said that if the ritual is performed within concert with Satan's direct descendant on earth, the Dark Lord himself may return. And then I heard a voice behind me. "Hello, Darren." I whirled around in my office chair to see Miss Robbins standing in the open doorway. Those ancient and hateful milky yellow reptilian eyes glowering at me over her thick fishbowl lenses. "How did you get in here?" I said. "The door was locked." Miss Robbins only clicked her tongue and moved closer to me. "You're not going to stop Satan from taking over this filthy little rock you call Earth," she said, wagging a finger at me. "You're too late. The ritual has already begun." Two thoughts went through my head at that point. One, Miss Robbins looked more like a frog than ever, and two, I still had the remote of minor inconveniences stuffed in my back pocket. Before any more thoughts had time to fleet across my consciousness, I yanked it out of my pocket and began mashing buttons randomly as I pointed it at Miss Robbins. "What?" But her voice was completely cut off as a blast of silver light hit her directly in the tongue, making it grow to monstrous proportions and flop out of her mouth and onto the ground. She yelled at me, hurling a ball of green fire directly at my head. I ducked just in time, and the fire shattered off the wall behind me, sending off little green sparks that ignited the carpet wherever they landed. I seized the office chair and hurled it at her, and as she ducked, I managed to pound a couple more buttons. The first blast missed and hit the wall, causing a huge patch of wavy purple hair to erupt through shattered pieces of drywall. But the second blast struck her right in the stomach, sending her toppling over backwards, covered in orange and silver feathers. She sprang back to her feet with surprising agility, heaving a black blob at me that I deflected into the wall with my laptop. I dropped the laptop when I realized that a dozen little oily hands had grown out of it and begun reaching out to grab me. I hit her with one last blast of bright golden light, and she burst into laughter. At first, I thought she was mocking me, until I looked down to see that I'd hit the little purple button shaped like a hand that read "Tickle Fit" underneath. Triumphant and merciless, I marched towards her, mashing the volume button over and over again. Her laughter first became uproarious gales, and then thunderous shrieks as I tormented her. Distracted by my task, I became aware of two things far too late. The first was that beneath the tempest shrieks of Miss Robbins's laughter, my stairs were screaming in protest as heavy feet took them two at a time. And the second was that a bit of green fire had dripped down from the ceiling of my study and landed directly onto my head, and in 2 seconds my hair would be entirely engulfed in flames. The culmination of those two events came at the same time. Frankenteddy appeared in my doorway from downstairs, and I felt the white-hot fire as it touched my scalp. "You are on fire," Frankenteddy boomed as he hurdled the shrieking Miss Robbins and raced towards me. "Allow me to pat it out." "Frankenteddy, no!" But my cry went unheeded, and darkness enveloped me as Frankenteddy's monstrous paw came crashing down on my head. I awoke in my own bed, the faces of my demonic family and Sarah staring down at me. I noted with pleasure that Miss Robbins and Satan were both absent among them. I reached up to feel my scalp, and breathed a sigh of relief when I felt hair there. The relief was fizzled out, however, when I saw that the few loose strands that came off in my hand were wavy and purple. Miss Hatchetface's face wrinkled up in concern. "Are you okay, Mr. Rogers?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay now."
"Well, that's good,"
a familiar voice said from behind me.
"You gave us quite a scare there, Derek."
I tilted my head up to see Satan grinning down at me. Oh no,